So Morena and Malolele, greetings everyone and good morning to you all. My name is Kathleen Siilua and I am a new registered migration agent who has joined Edina and the Mordunga migration team. I am just so grateful for the opportunity to share today. It's the first time I have ever done anything like this before. So I hope you will forgive me if this live falls short of your expectations. The good thing is Edina is back next week. She's also joining us today online and will be keeping an eye out on the chat box for me this week. I also wish to acknowledge and pay my respects first and foremost to the traditional owners, both past and present, of this land. We here at Mordunga Migration also acknowledge their ongoing struggle for justice, recognition, and acknowledgement. We also recognize as migrants, we have a particular responsibility to be better educated about the history of this country. And in a democratic nation like ours, our strongest voice will come when we have the ability to vote for change. And to do that, we need to become Australian citizens. Whether it's just the talk of the upcoming May election or perhaps just individual circumstances prompting people, I have certainly noticed that we are receiving more and more inquiries about how to gain Australian citizenship each day. And we'll talk more about that later on during our live. However, you can find out more information on our website about Australian citizenship and of course on the Department of Home Affairs website as well. If you are just joining us, welcome again. Please feel free to drop a message in the chat box about where you're joining us from. I am joining from Blacktown in Sydney and Edina is joining us from Narra Court in South Australia. And this is really the beauty of technology, to be able to bring us together despite where we might be around the country and around the world even. Wonderful to see you, Talua. Good morning. No sound. Oh dear. I hope, can I just, from Queensland. Oh, Connie, great to see you as well this morning. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. I hope the sound is coming through okay. So, yes, as I was saying here, I'm tuning in. Okay, wonderful. You can hear me. Thank you so much, Connie, for confirming that. I'll continue on. So here at Mordunga Migration, we do specialise in giving advice and assisting fellow Kiwis in their Australian visa and citizenship applications. However, many Pacific Islanders are also part of that New Zealand citizens category. And we are also seeing other issues arising where we have been able to help Pacific Islanders, particularly with writing complex submissions, lodging AAT applications, and also just looking to prepare ministerial intervention requests. We are still planning to set up our office here in Blacktown in Sydney. However, until that happens, I'm more than happy and available to do face-to-face consultations and home visits if you're in the Blacktown area or surrounding suburbs. I'm also happy to do Zoom consultations as well. So please do give me a call on 0435 768 277 if you want to know more. And if you do live outside of the Blacktown area, give me a call as well and we can see if we can work something out depending on your location here in Sydney. Again, feel free to also drop any questions that you might have in the chat box. And alternatively, you can also send through any private messages as well. Edina will be monitoring the chat whilst I speak, and we will do our best to respond to those questions in the latter part of our live today. So this week, Edna has kindly invited me to speak about why I became a migration agent, how I became a migration agent, and how I'm going in my new role at Moringa Migration. So firstly, I thought it would help perhaps to just touch on my background really briefly. I was born in Auckland, New Zealand to Tongan parents. And when I was a baby, they decided to move permanently to Australia and they settled in Sydney. And the reasons my parents decided to move here is that they had heard from a relative that the wages in Australia were just so much better. They could also see that in a bigger country, there would be so many more opportunities. And at that time, they were in their early 20s. They already had two small children. They were looking to provide a better life for us. And that was over 40 years ago. But I still hear that this is a common reason amongst many New Zealanders and New Zealand families who decide to move here. At the time, believe it or not, when my parents decided to move to Australia, they were only New Zealand permanent residents and they did not need a visa to come to Australia. My dad says that all they had to do was pay for their airfare and get on a plane. And if only that close relationship between the two countries remained today. If we fast forward to today, and you would have heard Edna in her previous live say that Australian immigration laws and how they impact the status of New Zealand citizens is complex. Why? Because over the years, Australian laws have changed a number of times, particularly since 1986. These changes have never really been made clear to anyone, particularly New Zealand citizens. And as a result, when we receive questions about how can I get Australian citizenship or permanent residency, we cannot just give you a straightforward answer on the spot. We need to conduct a comprehensive consultation to get the whole picture before we can offer you the best advice. New Zealand citizens do not all hold the same immigration status. And as a result, these differences actually impact the pathways, the visa pathways available for us to recommend to a client about becoming a permanent resident or a dual Australian-New Zealand citizen. And just to wrap up my background, I am the second oldest of four siblings and I have two sisters and my brother is the youngest. I'm also a proud auntie to two nieces and three nephews. And I've been married to my Tongan-born husband, Sonia, for almost 10 years, and we do not have any children. My career, in terms of my career background, I am a former Australian public servant or a Commonwealth public servant with over 20 years of experience. And I actually started my public service career in the Department of Immigration and Citizenship, now of course known as the Department of Home Affairs. I worked in the department between 2001 to about 2010, starting in the Sydney office and moving to the national office in Canberra. And I actually stayed in Canberra for 10 years. I really enjoyed my time in Canberra before moving back to Sydney in 2015. I worked in quite a few areas in the department and it gave me some wonderful experiences, but it was also really eye-opening as well, working in compliance, fieldwork, detentions, case management, and then moving over to more of the ministerial area where I did some cabinet liaison work, also parliamentary coordination and managing Senate estimates for the department. My second half of my career was spent working for 10 years with the Australian Public Service Commission as a departmental liaison officer at the Minister's Office. And I did a lot of policy work in ethics, staffing policy, and the diversity and inclusion team with a focus on disability employment. Last year, I did spend a brief period with the National Disability Insurance Agency, working as a scheme integrity officer. So as you can see there, I've had a rewarding public service career, and I was very, very fortunate to have a range of experiences over that time. And when I look back over the skills and knowledge I gained, and not forgetting the many colleagues who taught me so much along the way, I know that it was to prepare me for this next chapter in my career, and also to prepare me to become a more well-rounded migration agent. As you can imagine, working in such a department like immigration, it always attracted so many interesting conversations and also many inquiries from friends and relatives about visa processes, citizenship, detention, you name it. And I'd often try and assist by referring people to publicly available departmental information. So, on reflection, whilst working for the department, I was probably already starting to help clients to navigate through that noise and to really help them pinpoint exactly what information they needed. And I feel that essentially this is what a migration agent does. Would you not say, Edina? Trying to, work out what is it that we need to know in order to apply for a visa. So why did I become a migration agent? Why did I leave my secure public service job in the midst of a pandemic to actually pursue this new career? I actually, shortly after I left my job at immigration, I got married to my Tongan-born husband, and we needed to lodge a partner visa application so that, he could live here permanently with me. And I thought to myself, well, really, how hard can it be? After all, I had worked in the department. Surely it's just a matter of filling in a form. And I must admit that I got the shock of my life because it was probably one of the stressful times of my life. And all of those of you out there who have gone through a partner visa process can probably agree with me, and will have certain feelings about how they went through their process. But it was really something difficult that I went through. And it took me about 5 months to get the application together. At the time back then, I had to rely on really limited sources. There wasn't really much on the internet that could really help us. And so I put that application together, and with 3 folders filled of evidence in hand, we flew to Fiji to lodge it offshore because we had heard it would be faster. And eventually it was granted 6 weeks later. Now, it was evident to me by going through that partner visa process that applying for an Australian visa is so challenging, and that many people are missing out on opportunities to secure their status because it's so complex. And they simply just don't know, where do you start? What do you do? How much money is involved? There's just so many questions. To me, it also didn't seem fair that Australian spouses and families were being treated with a lot of suspicion when it comes to partner visas. And the requirements for the certain types of evidence that is needed can be really confusing to work out what is truly needed to satisfy the decision maker. So this really ignited a passion in me and a keen interest about migration law. And I truly felt that I could help people to understand immigration processes. So I wish I could say that when I made that decision to become a migration agent in 2016, that everything was smooth sailing and it was a happily ever after story. But it wasn't. In 2017, I enrolled in the graduate certificate in Australian Migration Law and Practice with Griffith University. And going through that course just really opened my eyes, and I love studying the course so much that I finished it in 2017, and I made that decision that to go on to become a registered migration agent. And that also happened to be the same year that Edina completed her course, and she subsequently went on to become registered. However, me, on the other hand, due to a lot of self-doubt and second thoughts, I talked myself out of taking those steps in 2018, and I opted to stay in my secure public service job. I thought about the fact that, I'd be risking everything. I'd be putting my family in a difficult position financially, potentially. I'd be starting again from the bottom. And who's going to employ me? Kathleen, I was telling myself, Kathleen, this is a crazy, crazy idea. I alluded earlier to immigration law constantly changing, and it's no different for the laws that govern the immigration advice industry that Edna and I are a part of. Prior to 2018, the knowledge requirement for becoming a migration agent was just passing the graduate certificate in Australian migration law and practice. And to be honest, that's still a high bar to get over as well. In 2019, though, the government then decided to increase the knowledge requirement for registered migration agents. Therefore, requiring us to pass a graduate diploma instead of a certificate, and also to pass a capstone assessment. Or if you held the graduate certificate like me and you didn't register like me, you would now still have to also sit the capstone assessment. So it meant that I couldn't go straight to be registered as a migration agent. I had to pass this capstone assessment. Again, just that period in my life, I was going through a lot of self-doubt, a lot of lack of confidence in myself, and it really stopped me from moving forward. And I'm sure you can all relate to perhaps a time in your life where you've needed to make that decision, a really difficult decision, but you're kind of frozen. But the thing with this journey that I've been on, each time I found myself kind of drifting away from the calling, there was just so many signs, conversations with people, articles that I read, emails that I received that really kept pushing me back to this pathway of becoming a migration agent. So for me, I finally took that as a sign from above, from God, that, it was time to really make the change. There was now this kind of restlessness in me. So finally, in June 2020, at the beginning of the pandemic, I know of all the times to make a decision about, to make a really major career decision, I decided to finally resign from my public service career and to finally focus all my efforts on this new direction. So the next step for me was really to pass this capstone exam so that I could get registered. Now, when Edna talks about the Department of Home Affairs and Migration Laws being really unforgiving, it's really the same with the requirements of becoming a registered migration agent. I was trying to look for another avenue, an easier avenue that would possibly be available for me so that I could bypass this capstone. But unfortunately, there was just no other way. Now, this capstone exam, it's an independent exam that's run by a provider chosen by the department. And it's an exam that's really there to check whether candidates meet the standards to give immigration advice. There are 3 exams, 2 written exams and 1 oral exam that you need to pass. And the pass rate is 60% for all 3 exams. It also costs about $3,000 to sit those exams. And if you fail, you actually have to resit the relevant exam. The pass rate for the exams in 2020 was less than 20%, I think, from memory. And last year, it rose to about 48%. So you can see that it's not exactly a walk in the park to become a registered migration agent. And I will let you know that in my first attempt at the exam, at the capstone exam in 2020, I failed by 1.5 marks. Yes, 1.5 marks. That pass mark and that failure, I took it hard, and it really knocked my confidence levels to such a low level. And I had to step away from it all and started to really doubt my decision. And I felt really dumb. I know my husband was probably thinking around that time that I was going through a midlife crisis during this time, because basically I returned back to the public service, and hence my short stint with the National Disability Insurance Agency. I returned back to my safety blanket. But there was a still small voice that kept the torch alive for me. And also, my family and friends were just saying to me that you've come this far, that we learn from our failures, and it's part of our success. So I attempted the capstone exam again last year, and to cut a long story short, I'm here today now, registered, and I'm in my dream job. I also feel that all those little detours that I took along the way to get to this point were meant to happen so that my path could cross with Edina and with Moronga migration. It was meant to be. So, what are the skills and qualifications that I'm bringing into this role as a newly migration agent? Before studying my graduate certificate in migration law, I'd already completed some postgraduate studies in economics, research, public policy, and politics. And this year, I'm actually hoping to complete my Master of Australian Migration Law and Practice. I also speak Tongan, and I'm an Ngāti qualified Tongan English interpreter. And explaining migration law terms in English is already challenging, and even more so when you're trying to interpret into Tongan, particularly when most of the time there's no direct Tongan terms for the Tongan words for those terms. And this is probably true for other languages as well. So I've been creating my own glossary of terms, which I hope to share more broadly in the future to help Tongans better understand migration law. Last week, we had a great question from Jane about the universities that deliver the migration law courses. And I'd like to take this opportunity to encourage New Zealanders and Pacific Islanders to consider migration law as a potential career or area of study. There are over 90 different types of Australian visas available. And although, not all of them are going to be available to New Zealand citizens and Pacific Islanders, there's just no way that I or Edina or any single migration agent could remotely specialise in all of those visas. We're only just scratching the surface of what could be possible other pathways for our people. There's also just so much more work to be done to help prepare our people to become eligible for potential visa pathways in Australia, such as encouraging the study of skilled occupations, which could lead to permanent residency pathways. If you think visa processes take a long time, becoming a migration agent also takes time too. You need a bachelor degree first, and as Edina mentioned last week, to become a migration agent, you do not need a degree in law initially, but you will need to complete a graduate diploma in Australian migration law and practice. So when you think about that, that's already, 4 to 5 years just to get that knowledge component completed. Once you've completed your diploma successfully, you need to complete the Capstone Exam, which I talked about earlier. And that exam is held 4 times a year. Once and only once you've passed the capstone, you then can apply to the Office of the Migration Agents Registration Authority to be registered. And that's a whole nother process as well. You need to provide a police check. You need to have professional indemnity insurance. You need to subscribe to Legend, which is a professional library of migration legislation. And you've got to do a whole bunch of other things as well. And to top it all off, your name is then published on the authority's website for about 30 days, during which a person may lodge an objection against your registration. Every year as a migration agent, Edina and we must obtain 10 continuing professional development points each year just to stay registered. So as you can see, there is a lot involved in becoming a registered migration agent. The decision to come into this industry is definitely not because it's an easy career to get into. Is it worth it though? All that money, the time, having to go through professional development and capstone exams, is it worth it? I can honestly say, having come through the process, it is worth it. Because working as a migration agent means assisting clients and our people in making probably one of the most important decisions of their lives. And you also get to be there when their applications are successful. How am I finding my new role at Motunga Migration? Since joining the Motunga Migration team, I've just been amazed at how extensive the role of a registered migration agent is, and the role of the team that supports a migration agent. We are bound by the Registered Migration Agent's Code of Conduct, and so every activity that we undertake is pretty much detailed and supported in the code. Applying migration law to client cases really requires good judgment and knowledge of migration law. And since starting, every single case that I've dealt with since joining the team has been really different. Not one case has been simple, straightforward, or easy. And I can see now that it's just not possible to apply a cookie cutter approach to visa applications. We still have to look at an individual's circumstances. We need to look at the law with fresh eyes, and then we need to be able to apply the relevant and correct parts of the law to a case. And I'm extremely, extremely fortunate to be under the guidance of Edina, whose experience has helped me immensely to learn the practical side of visa applications, but also the business side. Those days that we receive notification that someone has been granted their visa is the absolute highlight for all of us. I've heard Edina delivering the news to these clients, and it just takes me right back to the feeling I had when my husband's visa was finally granted. You can hear the joy, you can hear the happiness, you can hear the relief, the security, the thankfulness. You can just hear the range of emotions in their voice. And that is what ultimately makes our job worthwhile. I had been following Edina and the Motunga Migration team since about 2019. So when people say during our consultations that they decided to call Edina because of her lives, I know the feeling. Edina actually helped me to return to my journey of becoming a registered migration agent, because I finally saw someone that I could relate to. I finally saw someone that I could look up to in the industry, and someone that I could aspire to be like. In closing, I really do want to give a special mention to Edina, who is the Director and Principal Migration Agent of Motunga Migration. What many of you do not see or get to see is the hard work that she puts in for each visa application she works on. Then on top of that, she needs to be across the accounts, the social media side, the marketing side. She's developing the website and looking at the content. And then she has to have time for her team of 5, including providing a new registered migration agent like me with guidance, mentoring, and support. And she does all of this with a smile, just as you see her on her lives, and with all the calmness. There's a feeling of reassurance that you are in the right hands. And I can assure you, if you choose us to use us to help you with your migration matters, your case is in the right hands. I also want to give a big shout out to the rest of the Motunga Migration team, to Glenda, Emily, Dymphia, and Manny, who have helped me to settle into this role quickly. There have also been so many positive messages from the Motunga Migration followers, and for this I am extremely grateful. Malo aupito. My hopes and goals align with the values of Motunga Migration, and that is to help our clients achieve their immigration goals, and also that I provide an outstanding service that is professional and thorough. So that is all I have to share about myself and my journey to becoming a migration agent. I am still very early on in my journey, and I hope this little live has given you some context about my experiences and what I bring to the role, and what I'm hoping to also achieve into the future here with Edina and Motunga Migration.